Visit worldwildlife.org.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, October 22nd, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us. We've got a great live show for you coming to you direct from Potland, Oregon. My good friend and fellow Red State refugee is in the house. Lindsey Rinehart, say hello to the world.
Hi.
There you go. Get in close on that mic there, girl.
Hi.
There you go. Now they know you're here. And we've got other guests, and you're going to unmute them so that they can be heard. But first, we've got Theresa Collins. Theresa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome.
Great to hear from you. And who else do we have here in the studio?
You got Lee Haywood, Cannabis Emissary.
There we go.
Joshua Bird, Green Rush Events, Kena.
Jessica Jansen with Canna Farm Co-op.
Right on. So glad to have you all in the studio here, and we'll get a chance to talk to you as we get toward the end of the show. We'll open things up, and in the second hour, we'll also take our live calls at 84-420 radio. That's toll-free from anywhere on the North American continent, 844-207-2346, 84-420 radio. We'll take those calls in hour two, and we're going to talk about Oregon legalization. We're going to talk about what's going on in Alaska. You know, we don't really hear a lot from Alaska here in the media. What's going on up there, Theresa?
We're not getting enough attention, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to be ambassadors with the other states to talk about what's going on in Alaska.
That's right. All right, so we'll get some news from Alaska. And Lindsey, you've been following things going on the local level in Portland and Oregon in general, so we'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll get to that in just a bit, but we've got other segments here on the show that we are waiting for. Of course, every other Thursday, we visit with law enforcement against prohibition in a segment we call Cops Say Legalize Drugs. Joining us in the Cops Say Legalize Drugs segment today, we have Robert Guest. He's a former prosecutor in Texas, Kaufman, Texas, so I'm sure he'll have all sorts of perspective on why we need to end this futile prohibition of drugs, futile and harmful prohibition of drugs, we should say. Also coming up on the show today, we're going to have a mini radical rant because we've got so many live guests in the studios. I can't do a full extended rant. Not enough time, but we'll do a mini rant on how activists may be becoming marginalized or irrelevant in the conversation to legalize marijuana, especially in California. Going to give you some updates on who's got the big bucks and how they're going to spend them. Also, we'll have a behind the headlines today where we go back to our home state of Idaho, Lindsey. Idaho will let 25 kids use pharmaceutical CBD. What do you think?
I think that sounds like a burning bus for people that are not getting the treatment that they need with improper medical care.
There we go.
But that's Idaho, improper medical care.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about how Idaho is a cruel island surrounded now by states that endorse some form of medical marijuana, even if it's just CBD only. Even Utah's on board. Man, that's pretty sad when Idaho's lagging behind Utah. But all of that comes right after this first break in the 420 radio news. And in the headlines today, the breathalyzer for pot, it's on its way. We'll tell you when and where. Bernie Sanders was on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. We'll say what he had to say about marijuana legalization. Kennewick, Washington, banning outdoor medical marijuana grows. We'll give you the details. Colorado banking, another roadblock from the Fed. And Southern Oregon, Jackson County, the smell of marijuana is just unbearable. All that coming up on the Russ Belville Show.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
You're tuned in to 420radio.org.
I'm Nick Lachey. Ohio is my home, and I care very deeply about the people here, which is why I'm proud to be a part of a movement that's going to create jobs, reinvigorate our economy, and improve the safety of our communities.
It'll give me a chance to open a business or a job to pay off my college loans.
And legalizing marijuana will provide tax revenue for local safety services. Let's do what the politicians haven't done. For marijuana legalization, vote no on 2 and yes on 3.
Imagine life without taxes. Let New Era Certified Public Accountants, NewEraCPAs.com, handle your Cannabis 280E and tax strategy. Get your business prepared with New Era CPA's Cannabis Finance Bootcamp. NewEraCPAs.com, with years of experience in the industry, we are one of the nation's leading accounting firms for growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies from Washington to California. NewEraCPAs.com. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Replays of 420 Radio News are embeddable and shareable from our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/RadicalRuss. Now, the marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Thursday, October 22nd, 2015. Researchers at Washington State University say they think they are about a year away from having a portable breath test that police can use to detect if someone has recently consumed marijuana. Herbert Hill, a WSU chemistry professor working on the project, said his research team has completed its first round of testing of the marijuana breathalyzer and has made some improvements. The team is about to start a second round of testing, and Hill said he hopes to make the device available for police to use in the field sometime next year. While police would still need to get a warrant and draw a person's blood to see if they meet the legal definition of impairment under the state's marijuana laws, a breath test could be a more reliable way to detect marijuana impairment in the field than field sobriety tests that the officers use now. Though Donald Trump abruptly canceled his Jimmy Kimmel Live appearance earlier this week, the host still seized an opportunity to speak with a presidential candidate when Brooklyn native Bernie Sanders joined the host on Wednesday night's episode as Jimmy Kimmel's week-long residency at the Brooklyn Academy of Music continues. When Kimmel asked the presidential candidate where he stood on the legalization of marijuana, Sanders discussed the excessive amount of American citizens in prison for marijuana use and emphasized putting an end to the war on drugs, saying, quote, "I am not unfavorably disposed to moving forward toward the legalization of marijuana," end quote, Sanders told Kimmel. The host then added to the idea, suggesting that if Sanders is elected, he should have postal carriers deliver marijuana, making it simpler for everyone. Quote, "That'll get rid of the federal deficit pretty quickly, won't it?" End quote, Sanders joked in response. Many Kennewick, Washington medical marijuana growers will have to take it inside. The city council voted 4-1 on Tuesday evening to restrict so-called nuisance or outdoor marijuana grows that can be seen or smelled from adjacent public or private property. Several people spoke to the council before the vote, mostly telling stories about problems they face with out-of-control marijuana operations. They talked of neighbors with 45 plants towering 10 feet high, people carrying backpacks of pot out of grow houses, likely with the intent to sell it, nauseous smells, and rising crime. Quote, "I've never heard gunshots like I have the last 3 years," said Retha Sanders, who has lived in her home on 6th Avenue for 64 years. "I cannot have my windows down because of the smell," end quote. Diane Crawford, a candidate for city council, was the only member of the public to speak against the change. She said medical marijuana patients would have to spend at least $2,000 to move their operations inside. Colorado's attempt to create a bank to serve its marijuana industry has suffered another setback by the federal government and could be facing an impossible dilemma. The Federal Reserve, the guardian of the U.S. banking system, said in a court filing Wednesday that it doesn't intend to accept a penny connected to the sale of pot because the drug remains illegal under federal law. The stance appears to mark a shift in the position of the federal government. Last year, the U.S. Treasury Department issued rules for how banks could accept pot money. The filing came in a legal battle between the Federal Reserve and the would-be Fourth Corner Credit Union, which was set up last year to serve Colorado's $700 million a year marijuana industry. The Federal Reserve said in its filing that, quote, "transporting or transmitting funds known to have derived from the distribution of marijuana is illegal," end quote. Many residents in rural Jackson County, Oregon, say their peaceful way of life is being threatened by people grabbing up land for marijuana grows. Quote, "We've got a little gold rush going on. People have their minds set on profit and getting fabulously rich," end quote, said Rich Fairbanks, who lives in the Applegate Valley near a marijuana grow with plants as tall as small trees. He said marijuana growers are buying up rural residential sites with water and power, displacing home buyers, and using up scarce well water. Rural resident Kathy Sabato says she lives within 100 yards of a medical marijuana grow. She and her husband feel they can no longer use their hot tub or host barbecues because the situation outdoors has become unbearable. Several other neighbors, including those in Sam's Valley and near Talent, said the smell of ripening marijuana is unbearable. This has been your 420 Radio News for Thursday, October 22nd, 2015. I'm Russ Belville.
The Russ Belville Show, where we don't change our position on decriminalization in an election year.
The Fingerboard Extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The Fingerboard Extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard Extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com.
Yo, it's Kasky. I'm out here in Columbus, Ohio, letting y'all know that coming up November 3rd, we got a chance to legalize pot in Ohio. Huge step for the country, for the state. So I need everybody to get off your ass and go vote yes on issue 3, November 3rd. Don't be lazy. Let's make our country better. Let's make our people better. Start healing each other. Make the world a better place. Issue 3.
Idaho is what America was. That's a statement of pride for citizens of the Gem State who treasure pristine wilderness, Christian values, and conservative politics. Unfortunately, the statement also represents a stubborn clinging to America's marijuana prohibition that not only defies logic, but defies a simple human compassion for suffering children that all of Idaho's neighbors have come to recognize. It was announced last week that 25 children suffering severe epilepsy in Idaho may begin clinical trials this week with the GW Pharmaceuticals drug called Epidiolex, thanks to an executive order from Governor Butch Otter. GW's drug is a cannabidiol, or CBD product, meant to mimic the substantial success many parents have seen from treating their children with natural, whole plant-derived CBD oil in places like Colorado. However, Epidiolex is truly CBD only, with no psychoactive THC whatsoever. Most parents using CBD oils in the states that allow them are granted anywhere from 0.3% to up to 5% THC in the oil. Many parents find that CBD oil without higher levels of THC doesn't produce the relief from seizures that their children require. 25 children out of a possible 1,500 or more who could qualify in Idaho will be granted this opportunity to end their suffering. To be one of the 25, the epileptic child must have already tried 4 other ineffective pharmaceutical medications. Some of the side effects from these medications include nausea, vomiting, dizziness, drowsiness, constipation, dry mouth, unsteadiness, mouth sores, swollen lymph nodes, persistent vomiting, severe stomach, abdominal pain, yellowing eyes and skin, dark urine, change in the amount of urine, persistent or severe headache, fainting, fast, slow, irregular heartbeat, unusual eye movements or nystagmus, vision changes such as blurred vision, joint pain, swelling of the ankles, feet, pain, redness, swelling or arms of the legs, numbness, tingling of the hands or feet, sun sensitivity, signs of low levels of sodium in the blood such as persistent nausea, extreme drowsiness, mental mood changes including confusion and seizures, depression, suicidal thoughts and attempts, other mental mood problems, symptoms of a serious allergic reaction including rash, itching, swelling, especially of the face, tongue, or throat, severe dizziness, or trouble breathing. That's the list of possible side effects from just one of those epilepsy medications. So Governor Butch Otter wants to make sure that the child takes 3 more of those medications before we try the big pharma version of the no THC allowed, non-toxic, non-psychoactive oil from a plant. The executive order from Governor Butch Otter came after his veto last April of a medical marijuana bill that had passed both houses of the Idaho legislature with tremendous support. Now, Idaho's Senate had voted 29-5 just 2 years prior on a resolution that the Senate is opposed to efforts to legalize marijuana for any purpose, including what they referred to as a scare quotes medical marijuana initiative. Yet the almost identical Idaho Senate voted 22-12 to approve of limited medical use of CBD oil for epileptic kids. Otter's veto of CBD-only legislation was the first of its kind. CBD-only laws in neighboring Utah in 2014 then spread rapidly to similarly religious rural conservative states like Iowa and the entire South. With Wyoming's recent adoption of a CBD-only law, Idaho finds itself surrounded on the west by fully legal states, Oregon and Washington, to the south and east by medical marijuana states, Nevada and Montana, and CBD-only states, Utah and Washington. And to the north by Canada, which has medical marijuana and, thanks to the recent majority win by the Liberal Party, likely legal marijuana soon. And that's just fine with Idaho's drug czar. Alicia Figueroa, director of Governor Otter's Office of Drug Policy, told the Spokesman Review, quote, "Idahoans are not afraid of being different than their neighbors. I think that they are wanting to protect their way of life." End quote. Well, what way of life was protected when Governor Otter vetoed a CBD-only law and instead only allowed just 25 children of 1,500 to receive life-saving treatment with Big Pharma's version of a CBD oil? Well, according to his veto statement, quote, "There were too many questions and problems," end quote, with the bill. Continuing, quote, "Of course I sympathize with the heartbreaking dilemma facing some families trying to cope with the debilitating impacts of the disease. But the bill asks us to look past the potential misuse and abuse with criminal intent." End quote. Yeah, Governor. We all know what a den of iniquity Utah became after it legalized a cannabis oil that cannot get anyone high. Yeah. Can Governor Otter seriously believe that desperate parents giving their epileptic kids a dose of non-psychoactive cannabis oil is the slippery slope that leads to teenagers doing bong rips while they speed down the freeway on the way to their heroin dealer's house? It boggles the mind. Idaho stands as an island of cruelty amongst the Intermountain states that have finally recognized, even Wyoming, even Utah, that have recognized you don't let a child suffer when you got a non-toxic, non-psychoactive alternative. Not when you've got 15 other states in the South even that are letting this happen. You just don't do that.
Loony.
It is loony. My God. Georgia allows CBD oil with up to 5% THC in it. Georgia! And Idaho can't get behind this? That's insane. Too little, too late, Governor Otter. Too little, too late. Be right back with a mini radical rant, as if that wasn't one.
The Russ Belville Show, the National Wildlife Refuge for marijuana unicorns.
Let's talk about the plan to legalize marijuana. The politicians are playing games by calling it a monopoly. They'll do anything to trick voters. It's not a monopoly. It's a plan that initially limits the number of growers for strict regulation before adding more. It provides medical marijuana for those in need. It creates jobs and generates tax revenue. If you think it's time to legalize marijuana, this is our chance. Vote no on 2 and yes on 3.
Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland Normal, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland Normal at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the fourth Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland Normal, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
The Sacramento Bee has a story up entitled Big Money and Frictions Light Up the 2016 Pot Initiative Drive. It's all about the fight to legalize marijuana in California for 2016, and it has me wondering, was 2014 the last year for activist-led marijuana legalization? The story focuses on Sean Parker. He's that billionaire who founded Napster back in the day, and he's also one of the early investors in Facebook, among many other things. He's decided to throw his considerable wealth at drafting a marijuana legalization initiative all his own there in California. It has no history of activism or being involved in it at all, but he's going to fly in and legalize pot in California. And that's left some longtime California legalization activists scrambling, some of whom had already put in well over a decade fighting for marijuana legalization by the time Sean Parker was born, just 28 days before 1980. Reform CA, or Reform California, was supposed to be the activist coalition to champion the legalization fight. It was made up of veterans of the Proposition 19 campaign back in 2010. And Reform CA was supposed to be the cautious mainstream approach to legalization in comparison to some of the more radical approaches, such as the biennially proposed Jack Herer Initiative, or CCHI, the California Cannabis Hemp Initiative, or the slightly less radical MCLR, which is the Marijuana Control Legalization and Revenue Act. Reform CA boasted the support of major California marijuana grower and medical marijuana associations, civil rights leaders like California NAACP President Ms. Alice Huffman, as well as the big established legalization activist groups, Americans for Safe Access, California NORML, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, Marijuana Policy Project, or MPP, and Drug Policy Alliance, or DPA. But then MPP and DPA backed out of Reform CA. DPA made some noise about drafting their own initiative language, but now appears to be warming up to the Sean Parker initiative. SF Weekly's Chris Roberts also reports that the New Approach PAC, which bankrolled Oregon's legalization and is funded by the late Peter Lewis's estate, is on board with Parker as well as two Pritzker family Hyatt Hotel heirs. That leaves Reform CA without the big money backers they need, except for a few like Justin Hartfield of Weed Maps, who sits on National Normal's and MPP's boards. The difference would be that Sean Parker shows up as number 268 on the Forbes 400 at $2.5 billion net worth, and Hartfield is still missing that third comma in his net worth. Now, whatever initiative Parker moves forward with, it seems like that would be the front runner for California legalization, just based on the sheer power of money in politics. National players like MPP and DPA were once the gatekeepers to the three-comma club of philanthropic drug reformers Peter Lewis, John Sperling, and George Soros. But now their days as gatekeepers may be numbered, and their influence waning. In just 11 days, 10 wealthy financiers are set to pass marijuana legalization in Ohio that is as much a personal investment as it is a social reform. Billionaires in California are eyeing the world's biggest marijuana market and deciding they can create it themselves without activist help. California's Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom's Blue Ribbon Commission issued a report on how California legalization should proceed, and in it, his commission stated that marijuana legalization, quote, should not be California's next gold rush, end quote. But unless the California Assembly puts forth a marijuana legalization proposition, any initiative fighting for the 2016 ballot will need huge amounts of money, and those billionaires are seeing marijuana gold in them thar hills. I hope we can steer this ship, but man, the money's pouring in so fast. So many people are looking to get in on this. It's going to be difficult, folks. But keep at it. Keep informing your elected officials and these business interests what you want marijuana legalization to look like. We can have an effect. We're not dead yet. All right, stick around. When we come back, we're going to be speaking with former prosecutor Robert Guest out of Kaufman, Texas. He's a speaker for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. He's going to explain why cops say legalize drugs. We'll be right back.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. This is the Russ Belville Show.